So for example, power. It's not that you don't have power. It's just that if you look at where the center of power is in your life, it's mostly externalized for most people. You have power if you can recognize it in the world. So if there's a corresponding image or symbol or idea in the world, that means it's in you. It's just that you're projecting it. So you see someone who's in a leadership position, like your boss, and he's tyrant and he's like has power over you to fire you. That's your power. That you're not saying that you're a tyrant, but that's your power. And maybe because he is a tyrant, you reject it because you don't want to be a tyrant. There's a lot of complexity to that. Hello, welcome to another episode of Soul Sessions, a Jungian podcast. My name is Deborah Maldonado.
And I'm Dr. Rob.
We're with Creative Minds and the founders of a flagship program, Jungian Life Coach Training. And today we are talking about the hero's journey. We're continuing our series. If you missed any part of this series, if this is the first time you're listening to us, make sure you go back and listen to the whole series in order. It's really fascinating. Basically, we have covering 3 main stages of the hero's journey. 1 is departure, 2 is initiation, and 3 is the return. And then, of course, there's all these other little mini stages in between. Last week, we talked about the initiation. And we talked about the first 3 stages, which is really the road to trials and then meeting with the goddess, or in Jung's individuation, the Anima. So we're going to go into the Animus today, but I wanted, Rob, if you could do a quick recap of last week.
Yeah, so initiation is a point of no return, where the hero is committed now to this journey of self-transformation. And these trials that they have to face on the journey strengthen the hero in order for them to face the next challenges. And there's always a next challenge, right, in the individuation process.
We love challenges, yes.
In the hero's journey. Then the meeting of the goddess, which is the integration of the Anima. And the Anima, we talked about how it's really the world that we're dealing with. So both light and
passion and love and all those like emotional connection to the feeling sensations of the world in our life and our bodies.
That's right. And psychologically now at this stage, we're in the archetypal realm, or what Jung called the collective unconscious. We'll talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I just want to also back up and say the first part of initiation is doing shadow work, and to remember that shadow work is just a little piece of the whole process, and to make sure if you do shadow work, you continue on the journey. Don't stop at just doing shadow work, or else you're just going to feel like you have a shinier ego and not really fully going through the whole process. So the road to trials gives us an opportunity to kind of break down our ego's conditioning, our sense of self, and we're stepping into and evolving into someone else, connecting with our soul, which is the Anima. And so today we're talking about the next part of this initiation is atonement with the Father. So we'll talk about the Animus. So let's talk about that, Rob.
Yeah, so in the last phase, it is a kind of atonement or coming to terms with the mother, the material world. In the next phase, it's coming to terms with the Father. Now, the Father, symbolically, again, we're not talking physically, right? We're not talking about the physical, biological Father. Symbolically, the Father represents God, or the God, the sky God, the invisible force that moves things.
Like power.
Power, the protector, the invisible energy that animates material. So this source, we can also say symbolically and psychologically, we're talking about authority.
Stepping into our own.
Not only the external authority that we see in the world, but finding our power. And Jung always emphasizes integration. Now, integration, what it means is, first of all, because these archetypes are unconscious, or they exist in our unconscious, in our collective unconscious, we have to become aware of them, first of all. Through insight, we start to get an understanding of what is it that we're dealing with. We have to look at what was our relationship with our biological father like, because that reflects an aspect of our relationship now with the archetypal animus.
Well, and the archetypal God. I mean, your parents are God when you're there. Now, When you say integration, I was thinking that maybe a good way for people to understand what integration is that it doesn't mean you have to create it. So, for example, power. It's not that you don't have power. It's just that if you look at where the center of power is in your life, it's mostly externalized for most people. You have power if you can recognize it in the world. So if there's a corresponding image or symbol or idea in the world, that means it's in you. It's just that you're projecting it. So you see someone who's in a leadership position, like your boss, and he's tyrant and he's like has power over you to fire you. That's your power. That you're not saying that you're a tyrant, but that's your power. And maybe because he is a tyrant, you reject it because you don't want to be a tyrant. There's a lot of complexity to that. People, the world have power, money having power. Money is really invisible. A lot of people think it's like material because it's materialistic. But when you think of money, it's like numbers and it's an idea. It's a concept that doesn't really have a solid kind of, unless you, I guess even gold, the value fluctuates. So it's not even solid of what it means. And so when we think about money too, how much time do we project that money on power? And we feel powerful when we receive money. And then we feel not powerful when we need money. And so it's all about coming to terms with our own power and reclaiming it. And the
Absolutely.
animus is a symbol of all those things.
Yeah, so let's back up a little bit because the integration begins with the integration of the shadow. So, like we said, first of all, insight. In integrating the shadow, you have to first understand your patterns. And in coaching, for example, we look at, okay, what have I created? Where have I used my power to create something? And what haven't I been able to achieve or create? Those give us a pretty good insight into what the internal pattern of conditioning is. Once we have insight, because here's where a lot of people stop. They think, because I know this, I've got it. But no, insight is simply understanding and looking at the map. So the map is not the journey. The
Well,
map
it's
is
just like,
simply,
I know I shouldn't eat cheeseburgers. I know they're not healthy, but we still eat them. Or I know I shouldn't smoke. I know it's bad for me. I understand, but unconsciously, there's still the pattern that's
that's right.
happening. And those are really simple examples, but we do this everything in life. Just because we're aware of something doesn't mean it's going to change the pattern. Sometimes it's easier when you're aware than when you're not aware, but that's always the first step.
Yeah, we need the insight because the
Mhm.
insight gives us the map on where we're at and where we want to go. The next phase is the emotional work that we do around that pattern. Because if we think about where did the conditioning come from, it came from our early experiences in life. And those were absorbed emotionally, not intellectually. Most of the time, we were too young to even intellectualize our experiences. Therefore, they're imprinted in our mind emotionally. So the emotion, what that does, it starts to make the mind subtle, malleable again.
So you're
It's
talking
like
about shadow work right now, not the animus. Yeah.
shadow work, but also integration of the animus, because integration is the same principle. You have to understand what happened with my father. What was my relationship with the authority of my parents? What was my relationship with the authority of the schools that I went to? Those relationships, those early imprints are still in your unconscious mind, whether you like it or not. That's simply the way the mind works. So we're not judging good or bad. We're simply kind of understanding, how does the mind do its work, and what do I have to do to change it or to come into a new way of relating to it? If we don't do that, the old pattern remains and people continue to do the same thing in their relationship with authority. And remember, like you said, this is the relationship with God as well, or with the divine.
And where the power is, because in religions, many people project God is going to take care of me. I just pray to God, or that higher being is going to take care of me, which is fine, but that leaves you in a very precarious place of not having power yourself.
So the third element then is the integration. Once you have the insight, once you do the emotional work, you're able to integrate, meaning you're able to come to terms with that relationship to power in yourself, that relationship to authority within yourself that relationship to the universe, to the invisible power of the universe within yourself, not the external. A lot of people think if I change my relationship with my father, right, if I have it out with him or put him in his place or hate him or I don't know, or mend the relationship, then it's going to change. But that's not what we're after. It's an internal process. And Jung says, remember, we're moving in the collective unconscious, which means these are larger forces than just our personal history with our father. So
It's like having like a tiny little sailboat that fits one person that you're chugging on in life. And then you're good into the collective. And now you have this large yacht. You have more access to your psyche and you have to learn how to navigate in the bigger place in the world. But you have more resources. You have a crew now and you have, you can go on bigger adventures instead of staying in your, maybe in the pond in your backyard, swimming in your little one boat, just trying to survive. So can you give an example? Like we talked about a lot of examples in the last episode of the mother. So can you give an example of maybe a man working with his relationship with his father, or the father archetype or the animus in relation to this power?
yeah, so I often see this that if a man or a woman, but let's say in general, like you say, an example of a man that had an uneasy relationship with the father, a difficult relationship with their biological father. That doesn't prevent them from having a powerful relationship with the archetypal father, the animus. But because they don't understand the principle, they let their biological relationship or their relationship with their biological father taint or determine what their relationship with the universal father is going to be. And that's a tragedy because then they project that onto the God archetype. They think I cannot trust the spiritual power in me, which is
So trust issues a lot of times come from the father, the animus.
yes.
So I just want to say a lot of people get confused when Rob says the biological. He just means like the personal, not like if you were adopted or something, it doesn't count, or it has to do with that kind of genetic part. You meant the physical, personal father that was there when you
The
grew up.
personal father, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a tragedy then because the individual then loses their connection to the universal force that was called spirituality, the divine, the spirit, the great spirit. They don't have a direct connection to that power within themselves, and they think it's like appropriate for them to do that because of their personal experience with their father. So what the work is meant to do, this inner journey, this hero's journey of going inward, is to reestablish the connection with the divine father within you. So Jung says the self is the internal God. He said sometimes he would call it the God within because it reconnects you to your father within you, not mending the external relationship. Although what we see often happens is that the external relationship begins to change as well. And is the person no longer hates the father because they see what it is, that it's simply a personal interpretation that they were making.
Another example would be, I know for a lot of people, they have the father was very strict and dominating and kind of overpowering. And then the person has a really weird relationship with power because they think in order to express power, I learned that I have to be a tyrant or that this person that hurts others, like when I exert power, because they received their interpretation is that when someone exerts power over me, I'm going to I'm hurting. I got hurt. So I don't want to do that to others. And so they end up not wanting to take roles or make decisions. I know in business, even a lot of women are afraid to keep boundaries with their clients or their team members because they don't want to be like their dad, like that. I don't want to be a tyrant. So I'm going to be nice and nurturing. And then that ends up ruining, even making it worse, which not very helpful. And that's shadow work too, but also establishing that power can be beautiful. Power can be helping others. Like when you stand in your power, you help others. You get permission to do that when you ask for what you want. And in a power powerful way, people like, I want to do what she did. Like, I want to step in my power. I want to be able to ask for what I want. I want to be able to hold the space for people. That is really powerful. Powerful. So I think those ideas of power get distorted by our personal experience, and then we carry them over in our life in a more universal way. And we don't even realize it's affecting us. We just like reason it away and say, well, I don't want to be a mean person, or I want to be a good person, or I want to be a good leader or a conscious leader.
Mhm.
And then the ego loves to find a way to keep you in that pattern.
Yeah, and if you heard the last episode on the anima, where we kind of ended it with this idea that the anima becomes in the physical world for us, or is a reflection of that. The animus then becomes a reflection of our relationship with spirit. In other
Mm,
words, matter and spirit. Or if we translate it into modern terminology, matter and consciousness. The relationship between matter and consciousness now is the totality of how we see the universe. We see that there are physical forms in the universe, that's the mother, that are animated and supported by these energetic, invisible forces, magnetism, of
mm.
gravity, of quantum mechanics, right? All these invisible forces that we know are there, but we cannot see them. We cannot experience them through our senses.
So it's like I'm pregnant. The matter is the cell, and then the sperm impregnates the cell. But the sperm are so microscopic you can't really see them unless you watch them under a microscope.
Mm.
And you're seeing, like, all you see is the results or the matter of it, but the force of life and the prana that keeps us alive, all that is you can't see. And so they go together. And so masculine, feminine in Eastern philosophy, they talk about the Shakti Shiva
Hmm. Yeah.
and
And yeah, so these archetypal forces again are what the hero is confronting on their journey into the underworld, into the
Mm,
unconscious. So the underworld is simply a symbol of the unconscious processes. Therefore, in mythology, you always see the hero has to descend into hell, into the
mm,
underworld, to Hades, in order to retrieve the treasure hard to find.
mm.
So that this part of the journey is the ultimate boon. In other words, the ultimate treasure. What is that ultimate treasure? It's yourself, the true self within you. The totality of yourself can only be achieved when you integrate these archetypal forces into your awareness. They're no longer mysterious. They're no longer simply out there somewhere existing separate from you. They are you. You
Mm.
experience them as, oh, this is what my personal life is about. It is these internal forces playing out in my life.
So you start seeing that the inner and outer are really the same, instead of seeing this outer world and then I have this inner journey I'm doing and then this outer world that I'm in, and my spiritual life is private, maybe on the weekends or in the morning before I head to the office, but it's
Mhm.
fully integrated into our life, and that they're really one, that there's no separation. And yeah, it's a beautiful gift because the end of the separation takes away all the suffering, because all the suffering that we experience is the desire for something external that we don't think we have. It's always craving that, like, there's something out there that I need to feel good, to feel comfortable, to feel safe, to feel powerful, to feel loved. And when we reach this point, we realize everything's here. Like, I have it all here. Beautiful process. So next week we're going to be talking about the return. So now we have this beautiful gift. Now, how do we reintegrate into the world? How do we go back to the
To the
village? How do we spend Christmas with our family, holidays, go to work again and build a businesses, or pursue our dreams? How do we do that in the outer world? And how do we come to terms with even our family? We're different now. We're going to come back and we're going to be transformed.
Yeah, that's why the journey continues, and that
Mhm.
return is a really important part of the process. It's the ability to return and reintegrate into the world.
So we're going to take you back after the journey. next week. Anyway, have a great rest of your day. Again, if you missed the previous episodes, don't forget to go back and listen to them all, taking you through the whole journey in sequential order. And we'll see you next week as we begin to reintegrate into the world.
See you soon.
Take care.